Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, saber rattling from Iran, as some say time's running out for the Ayatollah. Plus, the U.S. carrier strike group heads to the Middle East. And Jonathan Spire from the Middle East Forum brings expert analysis on developments in Iran and Syria and their wider implications for the region. And how CBN Israel helps to build a better future, one school lunch at a time. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. As Iran's uprising enters its third week, the Islamic Republic is trying to smother the protests through a sweeping campaign of mass arrest and intimidation. The war of words is also continuing between the U.S., Israeli, and Iranian leaders, and during all of which the U.S. carrier strike group heads for the Middle East. Here's the latest on these and other stories. Trump told the online news publication Politico it's time to look for new leadership in Iran and said Ayatollah Khamenei is a sick man who should stop killing people. His comments came after Iran's supreme leader accused Trump of slander and blamed him for the deadly violence inside Iran. The war of words comes as the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Task Force is just days away from the Middle East. It's part of a military buildup in the region, including F-15s and anti-missile batteries. The White House says all options are still on the table, and the military assets give Trump a number of military options if he decides to strike Iran. Despite a new internet blackout, horrific reports continue to come out of the regime crushing the protests, including using snipers and chemical weapons against protesters and Revolutionary Guard soldiers executing the injured in hospitals. Sources inside the country say the regime has killed tens of thousands of its own people, and that for now the brutal response and large number of security forces on the streets has quieted the large-scale demonstrations. Over the weekend, hackers took over Iranian TV and broadcast a message from exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who some see as a traditional leader if the regime falls. At a Washington, D.C. press conference, Pahlavi said the Islamic regime is close to collapse.
Ali Khamenei and his thugs know this. That's why they are lashing out like a wounded animal, desperate to cling to power. The people have not retreated. Their determination has made one thing clear. They are not merely rejecting this regime, they are demanding a credible new path forward.
Pahlavi also says he trusts President Trump, but whether or not the U.S. steps in, the protests must continue.
I believe the president is a man of his word, as I said before. How many days it might take, who knows? Hopefully sooner than later. But as I said before, regardless of whether action is taken or not, we as Iranians have no choice to carry on the fight. We're halfway across the river. There's no turning back. We will continue.
This weekend, the Trump administration stirred backlash from the Netanyahu government when it released the members of the Gaza Executive Board. The body charged with rebuilding Gaza, which includes demilitarizing Hamas, lists representatives of Turkey and Qatar. Israel objects to both Turkey and Qatar for their ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and support of Hamas, and is requesting a meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio over the matter. Iran's top police official issued an ultimatum on Monday saying the protesters must hand themselves in or face the full force of the law. Tens of thousands of protesters have been swept up in a nationwide manhunt, while regime forces patrolling the streets are threatening to shoot anyone who comes outside. Despite the internet shutdown, some reports say the killing continues. One doctor reportedly described the crackdown as genocide under digital darkness. Even so, one Iranian woman told this radio talk show many remain defiant against the regime.
مطمئن باشید ما کارمون رو داریم انجام میدیم ما تموم نمی‌کنیم. اینا 20,000 از هموطنای دست گل منو کشتن. مگه من میتونم بشینم تو خونم حرف نزنم؟ من دیگه اصلا نمیتونم اینا رو تحمل کنم. ما خودمون این راهو شروع کردیم. ما خودمون داریم پیش میریم و خودمونم باید تمومش کنیم.
Iran's president warned on Sunday that any U.S. strike on the country would provoke a harsh response, and that any attack on its supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, would be tantamount to a full-scale war on the Iranian nation. In a speech to the Knesset, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had his own warning for Iran.
If Iran makes a mistake and attacks us, we will act with a force that Iran has not yet experienced. No one can predict what the future holds for Iran, but one thing is clear. Whatever happens, Iran will not return to what it was.
And exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi issued a direct message to Iran's supreme leader.
جنایتکار ضد ایرانی هستی.
You are an anti-Iranian criminal. You have neither honor nor humanity. Your hands are stained with the blood of tens of thousands of Iranians, the blood of children, the blood of youth, the blood of the innocent. You, your regime, and all your mercenaries will be held accountable for every single drop of blood you have spilled, without exception.
A key question now is, will some in the military begin to turn against the regime and side with the protesters? And what action will President Trump take once the USS Abraham Lincoln, along with other Navy ships, get into the region? In the meantime, the Syrian army has advanced against Kurdish forces in northeast Syria.
What happened in the recent days is that the government of Syria essentially has sought to reconquer the east of Syria, to take the east of Syria from Syrian democratic forces and to bring about their dissolution. And yesterday, a ceasefire was announced, which basically gives the Syrian government everything that it wants.
Jonathan Spire of the Middle East Forum told CBN News reports are coming out that jihadists are committing acts of rape, murder, and torture.
We can see it as a Sunni jihadi force. The fact that these Sunni jihadi commanders have now been sort of officially rebadged as division commanders and battalion commanders in the new Syrian army is all very nice, but in reality what they remain is the same Sunni jihadi fighters that we've known so well in the course of the Syrian civil war.
The Syrians have also released thousands of ISIS prisoners that many believe pose a deadly threat to the region, especially to the creation of a true democracy in Syria. Jonathan Spire, the expert whom you saw in our last story, fought in the Second Lebanon War in a tank in the 188th Armored Brigade and worked afterward for decades as a prolific journalist and Middle East analyst. Through the years, he's seen multiple protest movements calling for freedom from the Islamic regime. So we met with him for his take on what's happening in Iran, and later in the program, you'll hear his thoughts about events in Syria. Jonathan Spire, great to be with you. So much is happening in the Middle East, especially right now when the focus is on Iran. What's your analysis right now of the situation there inside Iran and you know, the wider implications?
First of all, I think it is fair to say, and the best informed Iran analysts are saying, that the Islamic Republic of Iran has just been engaged against the most serious discontent from its people that it has experienced at any time since the Islamic Republic was born in 1979. This level of frustration and anger on the streets has not been witnessed before, and we have witnessed also there have been instances of armed resistance against the regime in peripheral parts of the country, especially in the Kurdish parts of Iran. So this is very, very serious indeed. Having said that, it's been very clear the strategy that the regime has chosen to adopt against the protests, and as of now at least, it appears, at least for now, that this strategy may have worked. And the strategy was, as we saw in recent days, to cut the country off from the internet, to cut it off from all communication, and then effectively to go to war against the demonstrators, to use live ammunition to try to drive the protests by sheer terror off the streets of the cities of Iran. And the figures we're now beginning to hear, beginning to seep out of the country, that maybe up to 16 or 17,000 people may have been killed by their own government in Iran in recent days speak for themselves. That's a very, very brutal strategy, to put it mildly. It appears, though, to have been a strategy which, for now at least, may have been effective in the sense that the numbers of the demonstrations and the intensity of the demonstrations appear for now to have died down. So I think there's two things to understand from this. One is that, yeah, in the short term at least, sheer terror when used against a largely unarmed population can work. But in the longer term, what this shows us, I think, is the absolute bankruptcy of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has absolutely no solutions for any of the urgent issues facing Iranians with regard to the devaluation of the currency, with regard to the water crisis and so on, and therefore is reduced in a way to simply going to war against its own population in order to continue ruling over there by naked coercion, so to speak. And I think that's where things currently stand.
And in the meantime, the USS Abraham Lincoln Task Force is on its way. F-15s are coming into the region. It looks like President Trump has the option of a military strike. What do you think? Could it work?
Well, it can certainly work in the sense that the United States, has the most powerful military machine currently available to humanity, and that is, at the disposal of the President of the United States should he choose to use it. He could certainly inflict very great damage on the Iranian regime. He could, should he wish to do so, probably be in a position to take out its leader, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. I think the problem is, and I suspect that this may be the reason why President Trump has not yet given the order, the problem is that it's one thing to kill this or that individual or to destroy this or that building from the air. It's a much more complicated matter to bring down a regime from the air. In fact, if we think of history, in spite of the kind of colossal and awesome gatherings of air power that we can think of in the course of the last century, it's hard to think of an example where a regime was brought down purely as a result of air power. I suppose we might say that Imperial Japan was, after the use of the atomic bombs in 1945. But certainly in terms of the kind of weight of magnitude of force that could plausibly be brought to bear now, it's hard to think of a way that the Iranian regime could quickly be destroyed and deposed by the result of the application of United States air power. I think as a result of that, maybe President Trump has thought carefully about this because he, I think, probably wants a quick victory. He wants to have a decisive achievement. And it's not quite clear, at least to me, if that can be done purely by the use of air power. I think that the use of United States air power will be massively positive and useful in the Iranian context. But I suspect that at the end of the day, it will have to be the Iranian people themselves who bring down the regime, short of somebody sending ground forces to Tehran, which of course nobody is planning to do. Which means I think that the judicious use of United States and Western air power in the end will need to be used in conjunction with continued unrest on the ground from Iran and the creation of a real fighting opposition force on the ground in Iran. That's a complicated business, and I'm not quite sure if the West or the United States is currently looking to get into that business. And I think we're maybe a little bit around that dilemma. But I should add that, we know that President Trump has shown judicious use of the information space in the past. He's been happy to lull the other side into a false sense of security and then sometimes strike. So it's very possible that's what's happening now as well. And I guess we're going to find out in the days ahead.
We will see. I mean, everybody's watching and waiting to see when the USS Abraham gets into the region and what may happen there in conjunction with the protesters and the U.S. Jonathan Spire, great to be with you. Thanks for your analysis.
Thanks, Chris.
Momentous changes have happened in Syria over the last few days, but you may not be hearing about it with so much coverage about Iran. Jonathan Spire and I continued our conversation turning to the recent dissolution of the Syrian Democratic Forces at the hands of the Syrian army backed by Turkey. These forces in the northeast supported the U.S. 10 years ago in their fight against ISIS, and they set up their own autonomous democratic government, which now looks like it may not survive. Take a look. Jonathan, you and I have reported on northeast Syria. You've been in Syria ever since the beginning of the civil war. But right now, there's a crisis going on right now. What are you hearing from inside Syria right now?
What happened in the recent days is that the government of Syria essentially has sought to reconquer the east of Syria, to take the east of Syria from Syrian Democratic Forces and to bring about their dissolution. And yesterday, a ceasefire was announced, which basically gives the Syrian government everything that it wants. The leadership of Syrian Democratic Forces, I guess in order to avoid them and their people being slaughtered, frankly, have agreed essentially to their own dissolution. The government is now due to come into northeast Syria to take over border crossings, to take over oil and gas installations, to take over governance, and to disband the SDF as a force.
Now, the SDF was an ally with the U.S. in the fight against ISIS. And how would you describe the Syrian army? Is this a replay of what's happened with the Druze and what's happened with the Alawites?
Frankly, the Syrian army is a collection of Sunni jihadis, and I've visited Syria twice since the fall of Assad and been up close, so to speak. The fact that these Sunni jihadi commanders have now been sort of officially rebadged as division commanders and battalion commanders in the new Syrian army is all very nice. But in reality, what they remain is the same Sunni jihadi fighters that we've known so well in the course of the Syrian civil war. And the problem is that we know what those forces tend to do when they are deployed or make their way to civilian populations not of their preferred religious type, let us say. They tend to be very cruel and brutal indeed. So right now what we're hearing is, in spite of the ceasefire announcement of yesterday, many jihadi forces are operating east of the Euphrates. There are rumors of attacks on civilians. There are, I think, confirmed reports of them attacking SDF-held jails and of ISIS-associated prisoners being freed as a result. And the situation is very unclear, but there are very real concerns. I'm in contact on a daily or hourly basis with Kurdish Syrians inside Syria. There are very real concerns at the possibility that these jihadis may do what they've done in the past in the coastal area and against the Druze in the south and begin to carry out attacks on Kurdish civilians.
Does this represent the fall of what in the Northeast had been a democratic government that was sort of a bright spot right in the heart of the Middle East?
Unfortunately, yes. This does represent, as a result of the smart diplomacy, frankly, of Shara and those around him, that the partners of SDF, of that sort of more democratic and Western-oriented government, essentially appear to have deserted it. And as a result, it then had no choice, frankly, but to agree to its own dissolution. Now, be that as it may, that's one thing. But if that now comes to mean that civilians are left vulnerable to the depredations of the jihadis, as we witnessed in the western coastal area and in the south over the course of the last year, then that will be a very, very worrying situation indeed, I would say.
Was this done with the tacit approval of the U.S., and what role is Turkey having in this?
Turkey is playing an absolutely central role, and everything which I'm hearing from friends on the ground is that many of the forces that are now trying to push hard into northeast Syria are in fact Turkish-backed elements of the current Syrian security forces. As you know, the Turks don't have complete domination over the new Syrian government, but they do have very powerful and armed clients within that government. And yeah, what I'm hearing is that they're particularly strong, for obvious reasons, in northern Syria, close to the Turkish border. And it is these forces that are engaged now in trying to push swiftly into northeast Syria. Of course, the Turks regarded that Kurdish-led force as a sort of reiteration of the PKK, who they regard as a terror organization. They're very keen to wipe it out as quickly as possible. Regarding the United States, I think it's much more complex. Of course, the United States does remain, or did remain until the last moments, in close alliance with the SDF, the Kurdish-led force against ISIS. But I think, yeah, there is a sense in which not just the Americans, but the West as a whole, have kind of put their money behind Shara now, the new HTS government. The West wants quiet in Syria. The West wants somebody to govern Syria. They've decided to put their money behind this jihadi in a suit. If it was up to me, I'd advise them that's probably not the wisest course of action, but that appears to be where Western policy regarding Syria is right now.
Jonathan, great insight and analysis. And,
thanks, Chris.
Actually, kind of a sad situation to see the demise of this democracy that we've witnessed firsthand. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
2 years of war have had a devastating psychological and financial impact on many Israeli families. To ease that burden, CBN Israel is partnering with an organization to provide daily school meals for children who might be going hungry. Take a look.
Today, CBN Israel prepared nutritious sandwiches for hundreds of Israeli school children suffering from hunger. The staff worked together to make the sandwiches, which would help the children get through the school day while relieving the financial burden on their families. This project is part of an ongoing partnership with an organization that runs this program daily.
We provide breakfast for unprivileged children all around Israel, children who have food insecurity. So we give breakfast for them in school. 17,000 kids receive full breakfast every day from Nevet. And what we're meaning is to give them the opportunity to learn and to focus on studying and not to care about the food and the other aspects. So CBN, the donation, gives us the opportunity to subsidize those breakfasts to the schools. And also they help us to make sandwiches, which is great and helps the school a lot. So first of all, thank you for your donation and your help. It helps us a lot to create this program and to increase our activity all around Israel. Just their meaning and they're willing to help. It's very, very grateful, and we are so thankful for that. They just help a child in the end to study and to change his future. I mean, this is how people and kids can create better future for them. So when they eat healthy food and they can concentrate on school, this is the way to shape your future and build a better future for yourself. And you can do that with thousands of kids every day. So it's amazing impact.
What a wonderful story about supporting Israel's future by helping its children. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please keep praying for Israel, the peace of Jerusalem, and for all those caught in harm's way. And we pray especially for those fighting so bravely for freedom on the streets of Iran and in northeast Syria. May angels protect them all. I'm Chris Mitchell for all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.